I was driving along the empty highway, the night stretching endlessly ahead. The hum of the engine mingled with the faint static of the old radio, a comforting, low vibration that filled the cab. Fog rolled across the asphalt, curling around the road signs and reflecting the pale, flickering glow of my headlights. Somewhere in the distance, a single crow cried, and the sound seemed to drift closer, echoing in the stillness. I reached for the dial, and through the soft hiss, a voice whispered my name. It wasn't over the intercom. It was coming from the radio itself, low and deliberate. My hands tightened on the wheel, and I told myself it was a prank, or maybe the fog playing tricks on my ears. But the voice continued, calling out in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat, naming places I had never been, describing roads I had never seen. That's when I saw it, a shape crossing the road far ahead. Too fast, too dark to be a person or an animal. I never should have turned up the volume. The fog clung to the highway, pale and wet, pressing against the windshield like it wanted to seep inside. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, though the road beneath was smooth, almost empty. Every shadow seemed to stretch further than it should. The radio hummed low, a familiar comfort at first, but then the static thickened, a thin shiver running under my skin. Whispers threaded through the hiss, soft, almost pleading. I tilted the dial, tried to catch the station. Nothing but fuzz, and the whispering continued. At first, I didn't recognize the names, just fragments, the corners of streets, half-heard words, voices that felt like they had brushed past me once. One voice lingered longer than the others. It said something like, "Don't forget me." The words were soft, but they pressed into my chest, heavy and wet, like fog settling inside my lungs. The car's headlights barely pierced the white blanket outside. Trees leaned close to the road, their limbs scraping the sides as if they wanted to look inside. I imagined eyes in the mist. Or maybe it was just the way the fog moved. Static rose, higher now, trembling under the whispers. I caught a street name, one I hadn't seen in years. A childhood home. I shivered. The smell of wet leaves, of damp wood, floated through my memory as clearly as the scent outside the car. I wanted to turn it off, but the dial didn't respond. The whispers didn't pause. Remember the room. Remember the window. My knuckles whitened on the wheel. The voices layered over one another. Some sighing, some laughing quietly, far away but close at the same time. Every name they spoke sounded like it belonged to someone I knew, someone I had forgotten. The fog thickened. Each breath felt heavier, like inhaling the past itself. I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. A shadow drifted across the highway, pale and slow, keeping pace with the car. I blinked, gone, but the radio kept whispering, now more urgent. I realized it wasn't just names. It was memories, moments I had never told anyone, secrets I had buried deep. The wheel vibrated under my hands, tiny tremors that matched the pulse of the static. I dared to glance behind me. The road stretched empty, white, and endless, but something followed, something unseen, brushing against the mist, brushing against me. I wanted to stop, but my feet didn't respond. The whispers shifted, forming words I could almost understand, almost remember. Open the door, look behind. I reached for the glove box. The static surged into a low hum, like wind rushing through hollow walls. The names, the places, the whispers, they merged into a single voice. It felt like someone exhaling directly into my ear, close enough to feel wet breath on my neck. I blinked again. For a moment, the fog thinned. The road appeared empty. I could see the edges of the trees, pale and silent, stretching toward nothing, and the car felt lighter, almost normal. Then the dial clicked. The whispering stopped. Static filled the air for one last moment before fading completely. I exhaled slowly. The fog remained, silent and thick. The highway stretched on, empty and endless. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the names were still there, just waiting for the next turn, the next night, the next whisper. I drove on. The fog had grown heavier since the last turn. It pressed against the windshield, thick and damp, clinging to the edges of the road. The headlights barely cut through it. That's when I saw the first one. A mile marker, pale, almost glowing. It read, 42. But there shouldn't have been a mile marker here. Not for miles. I blinked. Then another appeared, closer than it should have been. 38. The numbers didn't make sense. But the glow was soft, insistent, almost inviting. I slowed the car. The fog moved around it, curling like smoke, brushing against the tires. Every breath I took felt wet, heavy with mist and cold asphalt. Another marker emerged, then another. The numbers kept changing, each one brighter, closer, like they were stepping alongside the road with me. The road twisted under the fog. Shadows from the trees leaned into the light, brushing the sides of the car. I could smell wet pine, damp earth, the metallic tang of the asphalt. I wanted to reach for the window, feel the fog on my skin, but the markers, they kept appearing. And every time I thought I had passed one, another shimmered ahead, waiting. I tried to count them. It was impossible. 38, 42, 35. Some numbers repeated. Some seemed older, faded, but still glowing just enough to pull my eyes. The hum from the tires on the wet road was soft, rhythmic, but over it, I thought I heard footsteps. Soft, hesitant, too slow to be real. Every now and then it paused, and I realized the markers were the only ones moving. I glanced into the rearview mirror. Nothing, but the fog. It seemed alive. It twisted, thickened, curling like smoke rising from a fire I couldn't see. The markers weren't just glowing. They were breathing. A faint pulse in the pale numbers. I felt it in my chest. A slow, quiet thrum, almost like it was matching my own heartbeat. The road bent sharply, and there was again a marker closer than it should have been. 37. I had just passed 42. I felt a cold finger brush against the back of my neck. I told myself it was a fog. It had to be, but my skin prickled, hairs rising in tiny, static shocks. I blinked. Another marker emerged. Then another. Each one slightly different, slightly more faded, but all glowing, all waiting. I slowed, but the markers didn't slow. They flickered along the road, pacing me. Numbers that made no sense. Numbers that shouldn't exist. I smelled damp earth again, closer this time, almost on the tires. The fog carried it straight into the car, pressing against my cheeks. I could feel the cold moisture settling into my clothes, my hair, my hands on the wheel. One marker, then another, then another. I realized I was holding my breath, trying not to move, trying not to let the numbers pull me in. And then the markers faded, one by one, swallowed by the fog. The road stretched empty, silent. I exhaled slowly. The headlights carved a narrow path through the mist. No glow, no numbers, only the road beneath me. I tried to tell myself it had been a trick of the light, a dream, something in the fog. But I knew better. Somewhere up ahead they waited, glowing faintly, counting, breathing. I drove on. The night was thick, wet with fog. It hung low over the asphalt, clinging to the car like a damp blanket. My hands were cold on the wheel. The headlights flickered, just for a moment. Then again, I caught movement at the edge of the road, a shadow slipping between the trees. I blinked. Gone. Another flicker. Another shape. Tall, thin, drifting along the roadside. Each time I tried to focus, it dissolved into the darkness. The fog smelled of wet pine and rusting leaves. The cold seeped through the window, brushing against my neck. The car felt smaller, enclosed, and somehow alive. I slowed, half hoping to see it clearly, half hoping it would disappear. The shapes kept pace, sliding between the headlights. Too fast to be human, too silent to be animals. The road twisted. A marker glowed faintly in the distance, pale as a candle. The fog swirled around it, thickening. The shapes paused there, just beyond the light. I wanted to call out, but no sound would leave my throat. Only the hum of the tires and my own shallow breaths. One shape lingered longer than the others. I could almost see the outline of a face. It tilted slightly, like it was watching. I blinked. Empty darkness. The headlights flickered again. The shadow moved closer. Or maybe the car had slowed. Everything felt uncertain, unreal, like the fog had swallowed time itself. A rustling along the trees. A soft crunch under something unseen. I couldn't tell if it was real or my imagination curling around the dark. The shape seemed to glide just outside my vision, teasing the corners of my eyes. I tried to stay calm, breathe slowly. The cars under my hands were steady, but my chest throbbed with something tighter, sharper. The fog pressed in. Soft, cold, alive. Another flicker, and one of the shapes paused. It stood still in the pale light. I swear I felt its gaze on me, pulling me forward, deeper into the night. I reached for the glove box, tried to touch something solid, familiar. The shapes melted again, slipping into the mist. The road stretched empty once more. I exhaled slowly. The headlights steadied, pale and constant, but the air still carried the rustling, the wet smell of leaves, the faint hum of something watching. The shadows hadn't disappeared. They had only stepped back, waiting for me to look away, waiting for the next flicker. I drove on. The road lay empty, slick with mist. Night pressed down, soft and thick, curling around the tires. Every turn felt familiar and wrong. The radio hummed quietly, static at first. Then a voice, calm, smooth, almost comforting. Turn left. No one was there, just me, the fog, and the hum of the engine. I obeyed. The road twisted sharply, sharper than it should have. The headlights carved pale, narrow paths through the white haze. Keep going. It wasn't an order. It was patient, insistent. The fog moved with the curves, brushing the sidecar. Cold droplets clung to the glass. The smell of wet asphalt and pine sharpened in the air. I tried to speak, to ask where or why, but my voice caught. The radio's whisper filled the silence. Now right. I turned. The road felt wrong beneath the tires. Longer, looped, a soft hum under my hands, as if the asphalt itself was breathing. Shadows stretched in the headlights, some familiar. Trees, posts, markers, but twisted, leaning closer. Each turn revealed what should have been behind me, but never was. Faster. The voice didn't demand, but it urged. I noticed the horizon shifting. The fog thickened at the edges of vision. The road bent, impossible angles, folding in ways it shouldn't. I wanted to stop, but the whispering voice pressed on. Keep going. Almost there. I could feel it in my chest, a slow, pressing rhythm. The smell of damp leaves grew sharper. The tires hummed over the wet asphalt, low and steady. Every nerve in me was aware of the curves, the shifting shadows, the cold brush of my neck. A faint marker appeared briefly on the roadside, glowing, then gone. The voice softened, almost coaxing. Soon, soon. The world felt wrong. The road stretched and looped, repeating itself in subtle ways. A tree I had passed 10 minutes ago now stood leaning on the other side. A bend I had just taken reappeared. I realized I was following nowhere, and yet the voice sounded kind, safe, even, but the road said otherwise. I blinked. The fog thickened. The headlights flickered once, twice. The voice whispered directions I couldn't name, the turns I couldn't anticipate. Cold sweat ran down my back. The damp air pressed against my face. The fog pressed against the car. Then the voice paused, just hum and static. And for a moment, I thought I might be free. But the road had changed again. A soft curl of asphalt, twisting beneath headlights, leading me onward. The radio whispered once more, soft and calm, guiding me into the unknown. I drove on. The fog had grown thicker. It clung to the road, curling around the tires, pressing against the car. The air was damp, sharp with the smell of wet earth and pine. I noticed at first out of the corner of my eye a shadow, tall, thin, pacing along the roadside. I blinked. It stayed, keeping pace with the car. Every step measured, quiet, almost floating over the damp asphalt. I slowed. The shadow stopped, paused, like it had been waiting. Then gone. The road stretched empty. Only fog, only the hum of tires over wet asphalt. My breath fogged inside the car, warm against the chill pressing from outside. I thought I had imagined it, but then it appeared again. Further ahead this time, closer than it should have been. Its outline was vague, just darkness against darker gray. But I felt it, The way the air seemed to move around it, the subtle drop in temperature, the soft brush of mist across my skin. I kept driving. Every turn, every bend, it reappeared, pacing silently. Just out of reach, just beyond focus. The headlights cut pale paths through the fog. I could see the shimmer of wet leaves along the roadside. The shadow mirrored the curves of the road, always beside me, always just beyond the glow. I wanted to stop, to look closer, but the moment I slowed, it vanished again. Nothing but fog and the soft hum of the tires. The air smelled of damp metal and soil. I imagined the shadow breathing in sync with me. Soft steps, almost soundless, moving with mine. I tried to tell myself it wasn't real, that it was fog, tricks of light, exhaustion. But every instinct told me otherwise. One curve revealed it fully. Tall, black, leaning slightly forward, pacing. It moved gracefully, deliberately, like it belonged to the mist itself. I blinked. It was gone. The road became endless white. Markers I remembered flickered in the fog. The hum of the tires, the cold pressing to the windows, the scent of wet leaves. Everything felt suspended, stretched between reality and something else. I could feel eyes on me, not just behind the windshield, not behind me, but everywhere the fog touched. I drove on, slowly, carefully, every bend, every rise of the road, expecting to see it again. And I did, not threatening, not running, just pacing, a shadow in the fog, patient, silent. I exhaled shallow. The fog pressed against the car. The tires hummed steadily under my hands. And I realized it would follow as long as I kept moving. I drove on. The fog pressed close, thick and damp against the windshield. The road stretched empty, pale under the dim glow of my headlights. Every breath felt heavier, cold and wet in my chest. A shape appeared in the distance. Slow, silent, an old truck moving alongside me. Its headlights were off. I blinked, thinking it must be another car, another driver. But it moved with me, keeping pace, quiet as fog curling around tires. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Empty. No one inside. No hint of movement. Just the outline of the truck, steady, silent. The air smelled of damp metal and wet asphalt. The fog swirled around it, pressing through the car's seams, brushing my cheeks with cold. Every instinct told me to stop, to slow, but I couldn't. It stayed beside me. Every curve, every rise of the road, it mirrored my path, almost deliberate. I tried to focus on the road ahead, the hum of the tires on wet asphalt, the faint smell of pine and decay. But the truck lingered in my vision, moving with me, unblinking, quiet. The road bent sharply. I felt a pull in my chest, a tightness in my lungs. The truck passed me slowly, impossibly slow, brushing alongside without a sound. I glanced again in the mirror. Still empty. The cab hollow. No driver, no passengers. Just fog and the faint outline of rusted metal. A rustling passed along the roadside. Wet leaves crushed under something unseen. The truck had gone, and yet I could still feel it behind me in the mist. The headlights flickered. The dashboard glowed pale. I could taste the dampness in the air, metallic and heavy. The silence pressed, thick and expectant. I exhaled slowly. The road stretched on, empty, pale, endless. The fog shifted around the curves, curling like smoke. The truck didn't return. But I knew it had been there, somewhere in the mist, watching, waiting. I drove on. The fog lay thick over the road, pressing against the windshield. Every bend was softened, edges blurred, the night pale and slow. The tires hummed softly over wet asphalt. The radio shifted, static first, then numbers clear, deliberate, times, addresses, names. I frowned. The numbers, they weren't random. Each one felt like it belonged somewhere I had been, someone I had known, or maybe somewhere I was about to go. Shadows flickered across the dashboard. Soft, fleeting, like smoke curling in the pale light. I leaned closer, trying to see. Nothing solid. Just movement. Just mist pressed into shapes. The radio whispered again. 03:17. 42 and D Street. I felt a chill crawl along my spine. The air smelled damp, metallic, like the first rain on asphalt. I reached for the dial, trying to turn it off. The numbers continued, insistent, pressing against my awareness. Every flicker of shadow seemed to answer them, moving just beyond my vision. The fog shifted around the headlights. Every bend revealed shadows that didn't belong. They flitted across the seats, across the steering wheel, across the dash, silent, too quick to follow. The tires hummed under me, low and steady, but the numbers pulled at my chest. Each sequence felt precise, uncomfortably precise. I blinked. A shadow lingered on the passenger side, crouched just beyond the light. I held my breath. It vanished the moment I tried to focus. 06:42, Pine Road, another set of numbers, another pulse through the fog. The world felt smaller, pressed in, like the mist had walls I couldn't see. I glanced again at the dashboard. Shadows flickered like soft wings. They were everywhere and nowhere, following the rhythm of the radio. Every time I blinked, they changed. I wanted to stop, but something compelled me forward. Each number, each time, each address, a tether I couldn't break. The fog moved, curling around the tires, brushing my face with cold, damp fingers. I felt the hum of the radio in my chest, the soft pressure of shadows along my arms. I exhaled slowly. The numbers faded for a moment, leaving static. The shadows lingered just beyond the pale light, watching, waiting, tied to the unseen pulse of the radio. I drove on. The road stretched empty, but alive with whispers, with time, with movement. Every sequence, every shadow pressed into the night. I knew the radio would call again, and I would answer. The fog hung low, thick over the road. Every curve felt muted, softened by the damp white haze. The tires hummed quietly, steady, carrying me forward. I saw it first through the mist. A lantern, alone, burning by a tree, its flame steady, pale, unnatural. No trail led to it, no path, just fog and wet leaves. And the lantern, I slowed. The flame danced lightly, brushing the surrounding fog with warmth and shadow. Shapes flickered just beyond its glow. I blinked. They were gone. Or maybe they had never been fully there. The air smelled of damp pine and wet earth. Cold seeped through the car, it seems, brushing my neck and hands. The lantern seemed alive, breathing softly into the night. I imagined footsteps approaching, soft, hesitant, rustling leaves under something unseen. I leaned forward. The shapes flickered again, fleeting, like smoke curling around the tree. The road behind me stretched pale and empty. The fog pressed close, curling against the tires, pressing against the windows. I could feel the hum of the car under my hands. The lantern's light pulsed softly in rhythm with my pulse. I wanted to look closer, to step out, touch the flame, but the fog seemed to thicken around it, darker at the edges, breathing with some unseen weight. Shapes flitted again, shadowed, fleeting, impossible to focus on. Each flicker brought the sensation of being watched, of something alive, waiting in the mist. The lantern's glow warmed the fog, but it did not warm me. The air smelled damp, metallic, heavy with stillness. The quiet pressed in, thick, almost tactile. I exhaled slowly. The flame flickered once, almost dancing away, and then the shapes faded. Just fog, just wet leaves, just the hum of tires on the asphalt. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Empty. No trail, no path, no sign the lantern had ever existed. Just a road stretching pale into the mist. I drove on. The lantern's flame lingered in my mind. Shadows flickered just beyond my vision, and I knew the fog would remember it, and so would I. The fog thickened along the roadside. It curled and clung to the asphalt, pressing against the car like a living thing. Every bend felt smaller, confined, the night pale and close. I saw the exit signs first. Faint, glowing. They hummed softly, their light flickering just enough to draw my eyes. Then I noticed the names, letters twisting, bending. The words seemed familiar, almost mine. I blinked. The fog swirled around the signs, curling unnaturally, like smoke drawn by a breeze that didn't exist. It pressed against the windows, brushing my cheeks and hands. I slowed the car. The hum of the tires felt louder, more insistent. The exit sign seemed to move slightly, just at the edge of vision, flickering, shifting, whispering. I leaned closer. The letters reshaped themselves. Memory, not just words. Places I had forgotten, people I had almost lost, names I thought I'd never hear again. A soft rustle moved through the fog. Cold air pressed into my neck. The hum of the tires and the quiet twisting of the signs formed a rhythm that pulsed through the car. I tried to look away, but my eyes kept returning. The signs weren't just signs anymore. They were mirrors, distorting, bending, pulling at my chest. The fog thickened at the edges, curling in to touch the headlights. Shadows stretched across the road, moving in patterns that didn't belong. Every blink brought new shapes. Soft, shifting, almost human. I wanted to escape, to turn, to leave, to find another path. But the whispering letters, the fog, the cold brushing through the seams of the car, they held me. A name flickered briefly. My name, and a memory I had buried. It pressed in, soft, insistent, like breath on my ear. I exhaled slowly. The fog swirled heavier. The exit signs glowed faintly, unwavering. Letters twisting in the mist, echoing voices, shapes curling just beyond the light. The tires hummed steadily beneath me. The air smelled of wet asphalt and coal metal. The night pressed closer. I drove on. The exit signs whispered, curling into my thoughts. The fog followed, thick and alive. And I knew some roads never end. The fog pressed low against the windshield. The road stretched pale and silent beneath the headlights. My hands rested lightly on the wheel, cold, damp from condensation. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Something didn't belong. Shadows leaned strangely, stretching across the back seat where no one sat. I blinked. The reflection shifted, just slightly, like water rippling. But the car behind me was empty, still, silent. The tires hummed quietly over the wet asphalt. The air smelled of damp pine and coal metal. A shiver ran across my shoulders, prickling under the collar of my jacket. I focused on the road ahead. The rear view showed movement, a shadow crawling along the seat. Soft, deliberate, almost reaching. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, but the reflection didn't match the space behind me. The seat was empty. Nothing should have moved. The fog curled closer, pressing into the windows. A cold brush of mist against my face. Every blink revealed the shadow in a new position. Closer, leaning, watching. The hum of the tires under my hands felt louder now, rhythmic, insistent. I could feel my breath quicken. The back seat seemed darker than the rest of the car, heavier, alive. I glanced again. The reflection leaned farther, impossibly, stretching toward me. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady my pulse. The empty back seat remained silent, undisturbed. The shadows flickered with the mist, soft, shifting, impossible to focus on for long. Every time I looked away, they moved. Every time I looked back closer, I wanted to stop, to turn around, to get out. But the tires hummed, steady. The road stretched forward, pale and empty, a rustling behind me. The smell of damp earth and wet leaves carried in with the fog. I dared not glance again, yet the reflection lingered, the shadow pressing into glass, following me silently. I drove on, hands tight on the wheel, eyes forward. But every time I caught the mirror, I felt it leaning, always there, always just beyond reality. The fog pressed closer still. The headlights carved narrow paths through the mist. The car hummed beneath me, carrying me forward. And the shadows, they followed. I exhaled slowly. The road stretched pale and empty. The rear view reflected nothing but fog and silence. But I knew it was still there. I drove on. The fog lay heavy over the road. The tires hummed quietly, steady, carrying me forward. Every bend was softened by the pale mist, muted, unreal. A rest stop appeared through the haze. Empty, abandoned, yet warm light flickered inside, soft and inviting. I slowed. The air smelled of damp asphalt and pine. A faint warmth pressed through the windshield, almost welcoming. I stepped out of the car. The ground was cold, wet under my boots. The lights flickered again, casting shadows that stretched and twisted across the walls. Footsteps echoed softly inside. No one visible. No doors opening or closing. Just a faint, distant rhythm, like someone moving carefully, deliberately. I walked closer. The air smelled faintly of coffee, old wood, and something I couldn't place. The lights flickered again. Shadows leaned along the corners, soft, shifting, alive. The door creaked lightly as I reached it. Inside, the rest stop was empty. Tables lined up in pale light. Chairs pushed in, untouched. And yet the footsteps continued, echoing somewhere just beyond my sight. I moved through the space slowly. The warmth of the lights felt unnatural, too deliberate. The air pressed against me, heavy with damp, soft, unseen weight. I glanced through the windows. The fog pressed close, curling against the walls, brushing leaves along the concrete. Outside, the world was muted, silent. Inside, the echoes continued, soft, distant, watching. I touched the counter. Cold, smooth, yet the warmth of the lights brushed my hands. A subtle, impossible contradiction. The footsteps shifted again. A pause, then a soft rustle, as if something moved behind the shelves. I blinked. Nothing, just shadows, dancing in the flicker. The air smelled damp, metallic, faintly sweet. The hum of the car, left running outside, thrummed through the floor. I exhaled slowly. The rest stop felt alive. Holding its breath, I turned to leave. The footsteps echoed once more. Soft, deliberate. The lights flickered in farewell, or maybe in warning. I stepped outside. The fog pressed in, thick, curling around the tires. The warmth of the rest stop faded behind me, yet its presence lingered, watching. I got back in the car. The tires hummed steadily under my hands. The fog stretched pale and endless along the road, and the echoes followed me, soft and persistent. I drove on. The fog pressed low over the road. The tires hummed softly beneath me, steady, carrying me forward. The air smelled damp, metallic, and cold. Then the tapping started, soft, rhythmic, from the dashboard. At first I thought it was a radio, shifting in static, but the pattern, it matched perfectly. A steady pulse, echoing in time with the faint hiss and whisper of the dial. I rested my hands lightly on the wheel. They trembled, just enough to feel it under my palms. The fog outside clung to the headlights, pressing against the glass. Cold air curled into the cabin. The tapping grew clearer, steady, insistent, almost deliberate. Every time my pulse quickened, it seemed to quicken in reply. I glanced down. Nothing, just the dashboard. The radio hummed softly, numbers flickering across the screen, and the tapping continued. The shadows in the car stretched and shifted, soft, elongated, moving with the light of the dashboard glow. Every blink revealed them slightly closer, leaning, alive. I exhaled slowly. The tapping pressed against the hum of the tires, against the whisper of the fog outside. Cold brushed my neck. The metallic scent of the dashboard seemed sharper. I tried to steady my hands. The tapping continued, soft, echoing, a rhythm that was not random, too precise, too knowing. The fog outside thickened. Shapes curled along the roadside. The headlights cut narrow paths, pale and fleeting. Inside, the tapping persisted. I imagined someone or something just beyond the dash, waiting, patient, marking time with a beat of static. I swallowed. The cold pressed deeper into my chest. Every nerve tingled. Every breath came with the hum of the tires, the radio, and the rhythmic tapping. The shadows moved again, soft, curling toward the dash, and the tapping unrelenting, echoing inside the cabin and inside me. I exhaled slowly, tried to focus on the road. The fog pressed closer. The tires hummed steadily beneath my hands. The radio hissed. The tapping never stopped. I drove on, hands trembling lightly, eyes forward, the fog curling and folding around the road, and the tapping echoing, marking every mile, every heartbeat, every breath. The fog pressed low against the asphalt, heavy, slow, alive. Headlights cut pale slices through the mist. The tires hummed steadily beneath me. Ahead, an overpass, the kind that swallowed light, and across it a shadow stretched, too long, too wide, moving independently, swaying against the lanes below. It shouldn't have been possible. I blinked. The fog clung to the guardrails, curling against the supports. Cold air brushed my neck. The shadows shifted as I approached, moving against the flow of the world. The radio hissed softly, static brushing against the hum of the tires. Shadows flitted along the edges of the light, small, fleeting, almost forgotten. But the overpass shadow remained, watching, waiting. I slowed. The tires hummed softer, uncertain. The shadows stretched further, leaning across the asphalt, brushing the fog with impossible angles. I could feel the cold pressing in, heavy and damp, curling around my chest. I leaned forward, straining to see. The lanes beneath the overpass lay empty, smooth, undisturbed. No cars, no pedestrians, no movement. Yet the shadow moved. I exhaled slowly. The fog smelled damp, metallic, sharp in the nostrils. The headlights flickered across the lanes, across the shadow. Every blink revealed it further across the highway, bending and stretching beyond reason. Soft rustling along the edge of the overpass. Leaves swirling in the fog, brushing against the rails. I wanted to look away, to leave, but my hand stayed tight on the wheel. The shadow leaned closer to the tires. Impossible. It moved with no source, no form above, just darkness, pressing and stretching across the road. I tried to focus on the road ahead, but every time I did, it seemed to inch further, curling and swaying. The fog pressed thicker. The cold air seemed to breathe against the windshield. The hum of the tires and the softness of the radio filled the cabin. Every nerve thrummed in rhythm with the unseen weight across the highway. I swallowed. The shadow stretched, flaring toward the headlights. Then it shifted slightly, receding as I drove past. Not gone, but withdrawn just enough to breathe again. The overpass loomed, pale and empty, the fog curling and folding back into itself. I exhaled slowly. The shadow lingered in my mind, long, impossibly long and patient. The road stretched pale, endless. The tires hummed steady beneath me. I drove on, eyes forward, the fog curling around the lanes. And somewhere the shadow waited. The fog pressed close, curling around the headlights. The tires hummed steadily, with asphalt beneath them. The night smelled of damp metal and pine. The radio shifted, a new tone low, humming softly, almost deliberate. It pressed into the cabin, vibrating through the dashboard and under my hands. Then a voice, soft, almost lost in the static, not from the speakers. From behind me, I froze. The back seat was empty, cold leather untouched. Yet the whisper pressed closer, curling around my ears. My breath came in shallow pulls. The fog pressed against the windshield, heavy and damp. Every blink seemed longer, stretching out time, stretching the silence. The radio hummed, its tone deepening, matching the rhythm of my pulse. The voice whispered again, low, calm, almost familiar. I dare not turn my head. Not yet. The tires hummed beneath me. The shadows in the car stretched and leaned toward the back seat, impossible and slow. The air smelled metallic, damp and faintly sweet, like old paper. I exhaled slowly. The whisper grew a little louder. Soft footsteps, careful, brushing against the seat fabric. Or maybe imagination feeding on the fog and hum. The radio buzzed in time with it. Numbers flickered across the display, meaningless yet precise. The shadows twisted, leaning toward me, toward the space where nothing sat. I wanted to look. I wanted to see. But the fear held me rigid, hands tight on the wheel. The whisper, patient, pressing, curling around the cabin. I swallowed. The cold pressed against my neck and wrists. The tires hummed. The fog pressed. The headlights carved narrow paths ahead. And the voice, it waited. I exhaled again, slower. The whisper retreated slightly, hidden beneath the hum and static. The back seat remained empty. The air, heavy, still carried it. The radio's tone shifted once more, rising and falling like soft breathing. The fog outside thickened, curling around the road and the car. The headlights cut narrow lines through it. The tires hummed beneath me. I drove on, hands tight, pulse steadying just slightly, eyes forward, fog curling around the road, wrapping every mile in silence. And somewhere behind me, the whisper lingered. The fog pressed low over the asphalt. Headlights cut pale slices into the mist. The tires hummed steadily beneath me. A highway sign appeared ahead. Familiar, green and white, solid against the gray. But as I drew closer, it vanished, replaced by symbols I could not read. Curving lines, sharp angles, twisting in impossible ways. The fog thickened around them, curling and folding, hiding and revealing in turn. I slowed slightly. The tires hummed softer, uncertain. Cold air brushed my neck through the cracked window. The mist pressed against the windshield like a living thing. Another sign appeared. It, too, dissolved as I approached. Symbols replaced the letters. Meaningless, yet precise. They seemed to watch, folding the road into themselves. The radio hissed softly, static brushing against the hum of the tires. The symbols flickered in the headlights, shifting when I blinked. I felt them move, almost alive, almost aware. The fog pressed heavier, wet, cold, curling around the wheel in my hands. Every mile stretched longer, slower, bending the night into quiet suspense. I exhaled slowly. The tires hummed, steady beneath me. The symbols pulsed faintly in the light, their edges quivering. The air smelled of damp asphalt, pine, and something metallic beneath it. Another sign vanished, and another appeared. I could not read them, yet they called my eyes forward. Hypnotic, impossible to look away from. The headlights cut narrow paths through the thickening fog. Shadows leaned along the roadside, flickering just beyond vision. The static in the radio hummed in rhythm with my pulse. I swallowed. Every mile felt longer than the last. The fog thickened further, curling into the windshield and the mirrors. The road ahead shimmered and shifted beneath the headlights. I exhaled again, slow. The symbols remained endless, stretching along the highway. The fog pressed closer, dense and alive. Every mile, every blink, a quiet, impossible transformation. I drove on, eyes forward. The tires hummed beneath me, the fog curling and folding around the road. And the signs, they vanished and appeared still, patient, waiting. The fog hung low, thick and cold, curling around the asphalt. The headlights cut pale beams through it. The tires hummed beneath me, steady, unchanging. Then movement. A figure darted across the road. Too fast, too fluid, not human. I blinked. The headlights caught a fleeting outline, dark, slender, almost melting into the mist. The tires hummed against the wet asphalt. A chill pressed against my chest. The figure vanished as quickly as it appeared. No rustle of clothing, no footfall, just a shadow fleeing the light. The fog swallowed it. The air smelled damp and sharp, metallic beneath the pine. I slowed, pulse uneven. The tires hummed softer beneath me, uncertain. Headlights scanned the road, but the lane remained empty. No trace. The radio hummed softly, static curling around the cabin. The figure, it had passed just beyond vision, yet lingered in the hum and shadows. I exhaled slowly, tasting the chill in the air. The fog pressed heavier. Shadows leaned at the edge of the headlights, twisting with impossible angles. Every blink revealed nothing, then something shifting just beyond certainty. I tried to focus on the road. The tires hummed beneath me. The headlights cut narrow paths through the fog. The figure had been there, or it had been waiting. A soft movement brushed along the roadside. Leaves swirled in the mist, but the air carried weight, cold and heavy. I swallowed. The shadow's presence lingered, patient, impossible, silent. I drove on, hands tight on the wheel. The road stretched pale, endless. The fog curled around the lanes, thick and unyielding. The shadow, somewhere just beyond reach. The tires hummed steady beneath me. The headlights sliced through the mist. The figure had vanished, but its fear remained. I exhaled again, slow, eyes forward. The road curling into the night. The fog pressing in, and the shadow crossing still in memory, in breath, in the quiet hum of the tires. The fog pressed thick around the headlights. The asphalt stretched forward, endless, pale beneath the tires. The night smelled damp, piney metallic beneath the chill. The road, it bent strangely, curved where it should be straight, twisted back on itself. Impossible loops disappearing into mist. Each blink seemed to fold the road in new ways. The radio hummed low, static brushing against my hands. Then whispers, soft, deliberate, curling through the cabin. Directions. They made no sense. Left, right, back, nowhere. I exhaled slowly. The tires hummed steady beneath me. The fog pressed, curling into the windshield and side mirrors. Shadows leaned along the edges of the headlights. Another whisper. Closer. My pulse quickened. Subtle tremors in my hands. The static hummed in time with it, pressing the air heavy against my chest. The road stretched ahead, then curved impossibly back behind me, reflecting the headlights' narrow paths. The fog thickened further, curling into the cabin with each turn. The asphalt glistened, wet and cold. I tried to focus. Eyes forward, hands gripping the wheel. The whispers continued, patient, curling around the hum of the tires. Each direction, a promise leading nowhere. The fog pressed closer, dense and alive. Shadows twisted at the edge of the light, fleeting and impossible. Every blink revealed more road, then folded it away again. The tires hummed, steady against the impossible loops beneath me. I exhaled slowly. The radio hummed low, whispering again. The fog pressed tighter. The road stretched endlessly, pale light folding over itself. A shiver ran along my spine. The whispers folded into the static, curling into corners of the cabin. Every turn, every mile, the road remained infinite, the fog and shadows patient. I swallowed, tightened my grip. The headlights carved narrow lines through the mist. The whispers lingered in the hum of the radio. The tires hummed beneath me. I drove on, eyes forward, pulse steadying slightly. The road stretched endless, curling and looping into the fog. The static whispered, patient, inevitable. And the night, it waited, quiet, unmoving, eternal. The fog thickened, curling along the asphalt. The headlights cut narrow paths through the white haze. The air smelled damp, earthy, metallic with cold. A figure appeared, still, in the middle of the road, holding a lantern. Its light flickered pale, hesitant, yet steady. I slowed. The tires hummed beneath me, soft and constant. The fog pressed closer, curling into the cabin. The figure didn't move. It raised the lantern slightly. A beckoning gesture, silent, impossible. The light reflected in the wet asphalt, trembling in quiet rhythm. I blinked, heart slow but tense, and it remained. Shadows stretched toward the car. The lantern swayed gently in the mist. A hum pressed against the glass, quiet but insistent. The air felt thick, heavy with unspoken patience. I tried to focus, eyes straining through the fog. The tires hummed. The lantern, pale, flickering, beckoning still. The figure didn't breathe, didn't blink. Then nothing. The lantern vanished. The figure disappeared, leaving only fog curling in its place. The road stretched empty again, silent, endless. I exhaled slowly. The hum of the tires was the only sound. The fog pressed heavier. The night remained patient, watching. The headlights traced the asphalt. No sign of the lantern. No trace of the figure. Only the mist, curling, thick, eternal. I drove on. The tires hummed beneath me. The fog clung to the road. The memory of the lantern lingered, patient, silent, impossible. The night pressed close around the car. Fog swirled over the asphalt, pale and slow. The air smelled faintly of wet leaves and rust. The radio flickered. Soft static hummed beneath my hands. Then words, fragmented, shifting, places I had never visited, cities I had never known. I leaned forward. The hum crawled along the dashboard. The sentences came in pieces, drifting through the static. Over the bridge beneath the hollow, my breath caught in my throat. The fog thickened outside the windows. Shapes moved just beyond the pale glow of the headlights. I tried to focus. Each fragment of the voice teased a place that didn't exist. A low pulse ran through the car. The radio stuttered, then whispered again. Turn, turn, do not stop. I could feel the vibrations in the steering wheel. A shiver ran up my arms. The road seemed to stretch and curl beneath me. Every word the radio gave pulled me forward, yet nowhere familiar. The fog wrapped around the tires. Rustling, soft, just beyond the glass. Static swallowed the voice. Then brief clarity. Beyond the trees, followed a hum. I blinked and it was gone. The hum lingered, ghost-like, vibrating in the quiet. I tried to trace the sentences in my mind. Places impossible. Names I could barely pronounce. The car's interior smelled faintly of ozone, cold and electric. The fog pressed against the windshield. Another burst of static. Words snapped and fractured. River Bend's last lantern. I imagined shapes moving outside, watching from the mist. Every syllable felt personal, though I had never been there. The radio went silent. Only the soft hum of tires on wet asphalt remained. My hand shook slightly. The fog seemed thicker, waiting. I pressed forward. The road bent, infinite and uncertain. The voice had vanished, leaving only questions. The fragments lingered in my mind, pale and echoing. The mist curled against the headlights. Shadows drifted where no one could stand. The radio remained dark. The quiet pressed against me, heavy, expectant. I drove on, the hum of tires beneath me, constant, lonely. The fragments of that voice stayed in the corners of my mind, like whispers brushing my skin in the fog. The night air was thick. Fog curled over the road, pale and heavy. It smelled damp, earthy, almost alive. I noticed the shapes first. They moved just beyond the headlights, twisting like hands reaching. Not the kind of fog I'd seen before. A shadow flickered along the edge of the trees, closer than it should be. Then it vanished, leaving a hollow silence. The road seemed narrower under fog. Every line of paint blurred, melted. My hands gripped the wheel tighter, feeling the slight tremor in the cold metal. Another flicker, a darker shape this time, curling toward me. I blinked, and it shifted like it knew I was watching. The fog rolled over the hood of the car. It pressed lightly against my skin, cold and wet. The shadows stretched, elongated, moving independently of anything in the trees. I slowed down. The tires hummed softly against the asphalt. The reaching shapes mirrored the movement of my pulse, urgent, silent. A soft, rustling whisper from the roadside. Not wind, not leaves. Something deliberate, something waiting. The fog thickened, dense enough to taste. It pressed against my face, clung to my hair. Shadows darted between the columns of mist, twisting, folding. I could feel them watching from every corner. Even in the rear-view mirror, nothing looked safe. The fog held its secrets, shifting with intent. I tried to focus on the road ahead. The headlights illuminated only fog and hints of motion. Each flicker of darkness felt like a slow breath against my neck. I reached for the radio. Static hummed faintly, a dull echo beneath the roar of tires. No words this time, only the subtle vibration through the dashboard. The shadows paused. For a moment, the fog hung perfectly still, a silence heavy with expectation. Then it moved again, curled toward the car, twisting around the wheels. I swallowed. The taste of damp, cold air lingered in my mouth. I kept driving. The shapes followed for a stretch, then vanished into the mist. The fog seemed almost disappointed, curling back to its unnatural calm. Headlights cut through the pale haze. Shadows flickered in memory, lingering in the corner of my eyes. The road stretched on, endless quiet. The fog shifted once more, like hands reaching unseen, patient. The night was heavy. The road stretched into nothing, slick with damp mist. My hands rested lightly on the wheel, though the tension hummed beneath my skin. Then I saw it, a glint of light ahead, faint, distant, not the reflection of my own headlights. It bounced off shapes I didn't recognize. A fence, a signpost, or something else. The air smelled of wet asphalt and cold metal. I leaned forward, trying to focus. Every shadow around it seemed sharper, darker, deliberate. The light shifted, reflecting from angles that made no sense. I blinked and it seemed closer. Objects appeared, then disappeared. I slowed down. The tires whispered against the road, soft, constant. The mist swallowed the edges of the light, curling around it like smoke. It glinted again, this time on something low to the ground. A rock? A discarded piece of metal? I wasn't sure. The shapes flickered as I passed. The reflection bounced from surfaces that shouldn't be there. The fog moved with a strange intelligence, parting just enough to reveal, then hiding it again. My breath caught in my throat. The dashboard vibrated under my fingertips. The radio humming faint static. The light, it followed the road, keeping pace, or so it felt. I tried to focus on the lines of paint. They stretched and bent under the dim glow, edges curling like paper in the wind. Every reflection seemed to hint at something watching from just beyond sight. I blinked again. The glint disappeared. Only shadows remained, pale and lingering in the mist. I drove on, slowly. The road hummed beneath me. Every so often, another flicker, glint, shadow, impossible shape, vanished before I could name it. The fog pressed close again. It smelled damp and faintly metallic. Every rustle in the trees felt like a warning. The distant light returned. Just a pinprick at first. Then it spread, reflecting across surfaces that could not exist, twisting impossible angles. I gripped the wheel tighter. The radio buzzed faintly. My heart echoed the static, tense, rhythmic. And then it was gone. No glint, no shapes, just the quiet fog curling along the asphalt. I kept driving. Alone, the road stretched endlessly ahead. But I could feel it still, watching, waiting, somewhere just beyond the pale light. Night pressed against the windshield. The fog lay heavy on the road, curling over the asphalt like smoke from a dying fire. I could feel the cold through the glass, damp and thin, sliding into my sleeves. The engine hummed beneath me, not the steady purr of a car, but words, soft, rhythmic, cadence matching the static of the radio. I listened. Each vibration, the wheel, the pedals, the seat, felt deliberate, intentional, almost sentient. The headlights cut through mist that shifted unnaturally. Shapes lingered at the edge of light. Trees bent like they were leaning closer, rustling their fingers over the road. I swallowed, tasting the damp, metallic tang of fear. The hum continued, layering under the radio, a whisper of sentences I couldn't quite catch, half-formed fragments, names, places, none I knew, and yet familiar, as if remembered from a dream I couldn't place. The fog thickened. It pressed in around the car, curling along the hood, rising like smoke. My hands tightened on the wheel. Every vibration seemed to answer me, mocking my stillness. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing but shadows stretching toward me. Shapes flickered in and out of focus, moving too quick to be anything real, yet too deliberate to be imagined. The hum became sharper, rhythmic, mechanical, but alive. The radio hissed beneath it, static stinging my ears in tiny pulses. I could feel each word in my chest, vibrating through bone, through breath, into the pulse of my own heartbeat. I slowed, though the road offered no end. The mist responded, curling, shifting, almost wrapping around the tires. Each turn of the wheel echoed with the engine's whisper. Each breath synced with the cadence of the vibration. I tried to speak, to ask something. My lips moved. No sound came. The whispering engine answered in silence. Its voice threaded through every hum, every pulse of metal and air. Shadows passed through the fog, leaning, bending, stretching just beyond what the headlights could reach. Every surface reflected a glint of something I could not name. My chest tightened, the smell of wet asphalt and old oil filling my nose. The vibration shifted, a pause, deliberate. I could feel it deciding. The road twisted, the fog curled tighter. I was alone, and yet not. The engine hummed a final cadence, slow, deliberate, as if marking the passing of time or me. The radio crackled one last fragmented phrase I almost understood, then silence except for the cold, breathing fog. I exhaled. The hum faded, leaving a hollow echo in my chest. The mist thinned slightly, curling back from the hood. The road stretched endlessly ahead. I drove on, quiet. The whisper of the engine lingered in my bones, and I knew it was still speaking, even if I could no longer hear it. The night air was thick and cold, clinging to my skin through the open vent. Fog wrapped around the highway like a soft, suffocating blanket. I could see the pale glow of the dashboard reflecting in my hands. Tense on the wheel. A light appeared behind me. Red. Tail lights, distant, pulsing faintly through the mist. I blinked. It vanished. My chest tightened. The silence of the road pressed in, broken only by the low hum of the engine. Then soft. A voice. The radio. It counted. Not music. Not words I understood. Numbers. Whispered. Slowly. Like it was marking something I couldn't see. I looked behind again. Nothing. Empty lanes swallowed the light. The air smelled faintly of wet asphalt and something colder, metallic, like distant rain. The tail lights reappeared. Closer. Flickering. Then gone, as if the fog had swallowed them whole. I felt the tires hum against the asphalt, vibrations threading into my chest. The radio counted again. 1, 2, 3. My pulse matched the cadence. I gripped the wheel tighter, nails biting into leather, the hum of metal vibrating through my palms. Shadows shifted along the roadside, trees leaning closer, their leaves rustling like distant whispers. The fog swirled unnaturally, curling at the edges of my vision, stretching toward the road. The red lights flickered a third time, brief, closer than I had imagined, closer than possible. Yet nothing existed there. I exhaled, tasting the damp, cold air, metallic and sharp. I slowed. The engine's vibration hummed under me, a soft echo to the whispering numbers. Each heartbeat, each turn of the wheel felt deliberate, like the road itself was counting along with the radio. The tail lights vanished once more. Gone. Only the fog remained, and the low cadence of the voice, unrelenting, whispering through the static, soft but certain. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it, but the chill in my chest, the vibration in my hands, the metallic tang in the air, they told me otherwise. The highway stretched ahead, empty, infinite, the fog curling, folding, reaching, and somewhere behind me, a light that should not exist had just faded again. The radio counted once more. Soft, slow, 1, 2, 3, and I drove on alone, listening to the fading echoes, waiting for the light that might never appear again. The night had thickened around me. Fog curled low over the asphalt, curling into shapes that felt almost alive. The road stretched endlessly, pale under the faint glow of my headlights. The radio hummed, a soft static, uneven like a heartbeat. Then a voice, clear, certain, "Do not stop." The words pressed against me, sliding into my ears, settling over my skin like a cold shiver. I swallowed. The taste of metal lingered in my mouth. Shadows moved along the roadside, long, reaching, shifting closer with each mile. Trees leaned as if listening. Their leaves whispered in the wind, soft and urgent. I checked the rear view. Empty, but the feeling of eyes, it never left. The radio pulsed with the words again. "Do not stop." The cadence matched the tremor in my hands. My grip on the wheel was tight, knuckles white, the leather biting into my palms. Fog thickened, rising to meet the headlights. Shapes formed in the mist, fleeting, like something watching just beyond reach. I breathed it in damp, earthy metallic. It lingered in my throat. The road curved gently. I felt it first, the pressure along my shoulders, like shadows leaning in, brushing past. I couldn't see them, but the air shifted with intent. The static surged, a low hum vibrating through the car's frame. Every number, every whisper, every vibration felt deliberate. The radio counted along with them, soft, unrelenting. I slowed slightly. The engine's hum matched the pulse in my chest. The road seemed infinite, looping back upon itself, and every turn felt wrong. The mist clung closer, wet on my skin, breathless. "Do not stop," the voice whispered again. The words threaded into the rustling leaves, slid along the metal guardrails, wrapped around the tires, humming over black asphalt. Tail lights flickered behind me, then vanished, red embers swallowed by the fog. The shadows pressed closer still. I exhaled, tasting the cold, damp air, feeling it crawl down my spine. The road stretched ahead, empty, endless, and yet the presence behind me grew heavier. Every heartbeat, every vibration, every whisper told me the same thing. I pressed on. The radio counted softly. Do not stop, do not stop, and the shadows leaned in, close enough to touch, close enough to breathe, close enough to swallow the warmth from the air. I drove forward, alone, with only the whispering static, the cold wrapping around my shoulders, and the final, lingering words echoing, persistent, terrifying. Do not stop. The morning light was pale. It spilled slowly over the asphalt, soft and quiet, almost hesitant. The fog still clung to the edges of the road, curling over guardrails and shoulders, folding around the trees in muted gray. The smell of damp earth and cold metal lingered in the air. The radio was silent. No hum, no static, just the lingering echo of its last words. Do not stop. I drove on. The tires whispered against the wet asphalt, small, steady, almost reassuring. The fog moved with me, shifting, folding, watching. Shadows lingered at the edges of vision, long and quiet. They didn't move like humans. They didn't blink. They just waited. I thought about stopping. The thought hovered like a pale breath, but my hand stayed firm on the wheel. There was nowhere else to go, and yet the road stretched forward endlessly. The air was still but not empty. I could feel it pressing against me. The lingering weight of the night, the unseen presence that had traveled all this way. The sun rose higher. It cast a fragile light over the fog, but it didn't chase it away. The mist became softer, more like a veil than a threat. I glanced in the rear view. Nothing. No headlights. No shapes. Only the faint shimmer of the morning, and the road stretching endlessly behind me. A soft wind rustled the leaves, carrying the scent of damp pine and asphalt. It felt like a sigh, a release. The tension in my shoulders eased slightly. The road seemed less like a path now, more like a memory, folded back on itself, silent, waiting. The fog continued to curl, shadows still lingering, but somehow distant. I felt them there, and yet they were no longer pressing in. I exhaled slowly. The silence of the radio, the quiet hum of the engine, the soft touch of the morning air on my skin. It was enough. I drove, not running, not hiding, simply moving forward, along the empty highway, alone but not afraid. The sun grew warmer. It didn't scatter the fog completely, didn't chase the shadows. They stayed, like companions I could neither see fully nor touch. I felt a strange sort of acceptance. The road would go on. The fog would cling. Shadows would linger. And I would continue, tire by tire, breath by breath, on this endless, empty highway. The morning was still pale, but it felt honest. The fog was no longer threatening. The shadows no longer heavy. The silence no longer pressing. I drove, and the road held me softly, like a promise I could not name, like a lullaby whispered into the quiet dawn.